A stone the size of a suitcase flies 400 meters, then takes a tower with it. No gunpowder, no engines, just rope, wood, and rage. This wasn't some myth. It was Rome's most brutal battlefield tool. But what machine could silence entire armies before they got close? And why did even seasoned soldiers panic the moment it fired? To understand that, we have to start with what Roman artillery really was. Roman artillery was mechanical weaponry designed to launch projectiles using torsion or tension, and these machines could turn a human being into scattered anatomy from 3 football fields away. Forget what you think you know about ancient warfare being all swords and sandals. The reality was far uglier than most historians admit. Romans built artillery to weaken enemy fortifications, kill at long range, disrupt formations, and assert dominance from a distance. Like having a bow and arrow, except the bow was the size of a house and the arrows could punch through 3 men at once. Let's be clear about the purpose here. These weren't ceremonial weapons for parades or show. The machines were operated by trained soldiers called ballistarii and maintained by military engineers known as fabrici. Anyone telling you these were crude contraptions hasn't seen the archaeological evidence. Roman armies didn't invent artillery, but they systematized and standardized it for mass production in ways that would make modern military contractors weep with envy. Think assembly line production, except instead of cars rolling off the conveyor belt, it was death machines with a warranty for maximum destruction. All machines relied on torsion springs made of twisted sinew, hair, or tendon. The engineering principle was brilliant in its simplicity. Store massive amounts of energy in twisted bundles, then release it in devastating bursts that could penetrate armor like it was made of parchment. Each legion had a set number of artillery pieces and standardized crew assignments. This wasn't random distribution either. Military commanders knew exactly how many scorpions, ballistae, and onagers they needed for different types of engagements, like having a recipe book for warfare complete with exact measurements for the perfect amount of devastation per square mile. The psychological impact was just as important as the physical damage. Enemy armies would hear the distinctive twang of torsion springs releasing, followed by the whistle of incoming projectiles. One can only imagine the sheer audacity it took to stand in formation knowing the Romans had brought their mechanical death dealers to the party. But these weapons came in many different varieties, each with its own deadly specialty. The Scorpio earned its name for good reason, and frankly, even for an unvarnished historian like myself, it's astonishing how effectively Romans turned pest control into a metaphor for human elimination. This compact killing machine delivered quick, deadly strikes that could drop an enemy before they even knew what hit them. Picture a massive crossbow mounted on a wooden frame, powered by 2 torsion springs instead of a simple bowstring. Roman ballistarii could fire iron-tipped bolts measuring 40 to 70 centimeters long. These weren't your typical arrows either, like a medieval hole punch, except instead of making neat little circles in paper, it made permanent ventilation systems in enemy soldiers. Maximum range hit around 300 to 400 meters, but the real sweet spot was much closer. At 200 to 50 meters, a skilled operator could place bolts with surgical precision. We're talking about picking off specific targets. Enemy officers giving orders? Gone. Standard bearers trying to rally troops? Down. That guy peeking around his shield thinking he's clever? About as safe as a mouse in a cat convention. The rate of fire was absolutely insane for ancient warfare. A well-trained 3-man crew could loose up to 6 bolts per minute. Compare that to a regular archer who might manage 10 or 12 arrows in the same time, but with nowhere near the stopping power or accuracy. Construction materials tell us everything about Roman priorities. The main body was solid wood, usually oak or ash for maximum durability. All the mechanical components used bronze or iron because Romans understood that cheap materials meant dead soldiers, and dead soldiers were bad for business. Because apparently the difference between life and death came down to properly twisted animal intestines, which makes you wonder what Roman soldiers talked about around the campfire. Portability was crucial for a legion constantly on the move. 2 men could carry a disassembled Scorpio without breaking their backs. The reality was far uglier than most realize. These weapons were specifically designed to kill people who were trying very hard not to die. But Roman engineers had even more devastating weapons in their arsenal. The ballista represented Roman engineering at its most ambitious, and let's be honest, their most sadistically creative approach to solving battlefield problems. While the Scorpio excelled at precision murder, the ballista was designed to smash, crush, and obliterate whatever had the misfortune of standing in Rome's way. Like owning a tool that could switch between being a giant needle and a sledgehammer, depending on whether you wanted to poke holes or flatten things entirely. This dual-armed monster could launch large bolts up to 2 meters long for anti-personnel work, or stone projectiles weighing 10 to 25 kilograms for structural damage. The engineering was based on earlier designs, but Romans cranked everything up to 11 because subtlety was never really their strong suit. Range varied significantly based on ammunition type, and the Romans were surprisingly scientific about their murder calculations. They had range tables for death delivery more precise than most modern pizza shops have for their delivery zones. Bolts could reach 400 to 500 meters with decent accuracy. Stone projectiles maxed out around 350 meters. Operating a ballista required serious manpower and expertise because the forces involved could kill you faster than the enemy could. 6 to 8 trained soldiers worked as a coordinated team. 2 loaders handled ammunition, 1 specialist aimed the weapon, 2 more adjusted torsion settings for range and power, and a commander coordinated the entire operation. Archaeological discoveries have revealed fascinating details about ammunition that showcase Roman military humor at its darkest. Stone projectiles often carried inscribed messages for the enemy. Things like, "Here's a gift," or "Compliments of the Legion." Even their rocks had better social skills than most people, taking the time to introduce themselves before causing massive head trauma. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Rome's most brutal weapons, smash that like button and let me know in the comments which ancient siege weapon you think was the most terrifying. We're just getting started with the really nasty stuff. Transportation presented major logistical challenges that would make modern military planners reach for the nearest bottle of wine. A complete ballista had to be broken down into frame components, arms, torsion bundles, and winch assemblies. Roman engineering didn't stop there, though. They had even more destructive ideas brewing. The onager was Roman artillery's answer to the question nobody in their right mind should have asked. What happens when you take the concept of throwing really big rocks and engineer it to its absolute, utterly unreasonable, destructive limit? This single-armed behemoth operated on a completely different principle from its multi-armed cousins. One massive vertical arm set into a torsion skein with a sling pouch at the end that could hurl stones weighing 30 to 90 kilograms in high arcs over enemy fortifications. Like having a catapult operated by an angry giant who specializes in home demolition and has serious anger management issues. Let's be clear about the projectile weights here. A 90-kilogram stone traveling at high velocity could demolish gates, collapse towers, or create massive breaches in walls that would take weeks to repair. Range topped out around 300 to 400 meters, which was actually less than other weapons. Accuracy was terrible, and Romans knew it perfectly well. It was about as accurate as a blindfolded drunk person throwing darts, except the darts weighed as much as a small horse, and the dartboard was an entire city. You aimed it at big things you wanted to stop existing. City walls, fortress gates, enemy siege equipment, or large buildings were all fair game. The firing process was absolutely terrifying for everyone involved, including the crew operating the machine. The violent recoil generated by launching such massive projectiles could seriously injure or kill operators who didn't clear the danger zone properly. Imagine a weapon so powerful that operating it wrong could flatten you faster than the enemy could, which really puts Roman workplace safety standards into perspective. Rate of fire was painfully slow compared to other Roman artillery. One shot every 3 to 5 minutes was about the best a trained crew could manage. Loading a 90-kilogram stone, adjusting the torsion, aiming, and firing required careful coordination and significant physical effort. Incendiary ammunition added another terrifying dimension to onager capabilities, because apparently launching house-sized rocks at people wasn't quite destructive enough for Roman tastes. Fire-resistant stones could be heated red-hot before launch, or crews could load pitch-soaked bundles that would ignite on impact. But Romans weren't satisfied with just static siege weapons. They wanted their destruction to be mobile. The ballista solved one of Roman artillery's biggest problems. How do you bring devastating firepower to a mobile battlefield when your weapons weigh as much as small buildings? Roman engineers took a standard weapon and mounted it on a wheeled chassis, creating the ancient world's first mobile artillery platform. Like strapping a giant crossbow to a chariot, except the chariot was pulled by horses who had to deal with explosions happening right behind their ears. This wasn't just about convenience either. Battlefield mobility fundamentally changed how Roman commanders could deploy artillery support. Instead of setting up massive siege lines and hoping the enemy would stay put like cooperative targets, legions could now bring heavy firepower wherever the fighting was thickest. The ammunition was optimized for speed and portability rather than maximum destructive power. Roman engineers basically asked themselves, do we want maximum death per shot or maximum shots per battle? They wisely chose option 2. Medium-length bolts around 1 meter provided the best balance between hitting power and rapid deployment. Horse or mule teams provided the pulling power with specially trained animals that wouldn't panic when the weapon fired. Roman military horses were apparently tougher than most modern people, considering they had to deal with giant crossbows going off next to their ears on a regular basis. Crew assignments were smaller than fixed artillery, typically 2 to 4 men depending on the specific model and bolt size required. Effective range hit 300 to 400 meters, which was perfect for disrupting enemy formations before infantry engagement. Forget what you've heard about ancient armies being slow and clunky. The Romans had figured out rapid deployment artillery centuries before anyone else even understood the concept. Like having a Swiss Army knife, except instead of opening cans and cutting rope, it specialized in opening holes in people and cutting short their life expectancy. The trade-offs were significant, though. Ballistae were less powerful than fixed weapons, but much more adaptable to changing battlefield conditions. Roman military doctrine emphasized flexibility and rapid response, so the reduced firepower was an acceptable compromise. All this sophisticated machinery was useless without the massive support system required to keep it running. Roman artillery was only as good as the massive logistical operation required to keep it functional, and frankly, managing ammunition, replacement parts, and specialized materials across hundreds of miles of hostile territory was an engineering challenge that would make modern military planners reach for strong drink. Bolt projectiles came in a bewildering variety of sizes and configurations, like running a warehouse that specialized in delivering death by mail order, except the delivery radius was measured in football fields and customer satisfaction was permanently guaranteed. Wooden shafts used the finest quality timber, carefully selected for straightness and durability because wobbly ammunition meant missed shots and missed shots meant angry commanders. Iron tips weren't just sharp points either. Roman blacksmiths forged specialized heads designed for maximum penetration and tissue damage. Some featured barbed designs that made removal nearly impossible. They designed arrowheads like fishing hooks, except the fish were people and nobody was planning to throw them back. They truly believed in making every wound as permanent and inconvenient as possible. Stone projectiles required even more specialized preparation that bordered on artisanal craftsmanship. The inscriptions and symbols carved into stone ammunition reveal Roman military humor at its absolute darkest. Messages like, "Here's a gift," or "Compliments of the Legion," turned artillery bombardment into psychological warfare. Even their ammunition had better manners than most people, politely introducing itself before causing massive structural damage. Torsion springs were the most critical and fragile component of the entire system. Twisted bundles of sinew or hair required constant maintenance and replacement. Humidity was the enemy of torsion springs in ways that could destroy months of careful preparation in a matter of hours. Like having to keep your weapons in a spa, except the spa was a marching army crossing hostile territory where everyone wanted to kill you. Frame construction used only the finest hardwoods available because Roman engineers understood that corners cut on materials meant corners cut on lifespans. Transportation logistics were absolutely mind-boggling in their complexity. A single legion's artillery complement required multiple wagons just for the weapons, plus additional cargo space for ammunition, spare parts, and maintenance equipment. Getting all this equipment into combat position was where Roman tactical genius really showed. Roman artillery deployment was a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction that could turn the tide of entire campaigns, and the way these weapons were positioned reveals the true genius of Roman tactical thinking. Siege warfare showcased Roman artillery at its most devastating and methodical. Different weapons worked in coordinated bombardments to systematically dismantle enemy fortifications, like a demolition crew with military training and a serious attitude problem about property damage. The process was methodical and terrifying. First, suppress defenders on the walls with precision bolt fire. Then, bring up the heavy stone throwers to punch holes in gates and towers. Roman defensive positions incorporated artillery as permanent installations along major frontier zones, creating what amounted to ancient killing fields with mechanical precision. They turned their borders into the ancient equivalent of a security system, except instead of cameras and alarms, they had giant crossbows and very unfriendly Romans. Naval warfare applications pushed Roman engineering into entirely new territory because apparently land-based destruction wasn't comprehensive enough. Small torsion engines mounted on ships provided fire support during coastal sieges and naval engagements. Imagine being a pirate thinking you're about to board a nice, easy merchant vessel only to discover it's bristling with bolt throwers manned by very unhappy soldiers. The psychological impact often proved more valuable than physical damage. Enemy armies would hear the distinctive sound of torsion springs releasing, followed by the whistle of incoming projectiles. That audio signature became associated with Roman military might across 3 continents. But nothing lasts forever, especially military technology that requires massive institutional support to maintain. Artillery knowledge began declining in the Western Roman Empire by the 5th century as central authority collapsed and military priorities shifted toward basic survival rather than mechanical innovation. Eastern territories managed to preserve scaled-down torsion artillery much longer, proving that institutional continuity matters more than individual brilliance. Roman artillery principles influenced later medieval siege engine development in unexpected ways. The Romans basically wrote the instruction manual for medieval siege warfare. Then everyone else spent the next 1,000 years trying to figure out what they'd missed. Archaeological discoveries across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East continue revealing new details about construction techniques and battlefield deployment. One can only imagine the sheer audacity it took to design, build, and deploy these mechanical monsters across an empire that stretched from Britain to distant eastern territories. Think you could handle operating one of these ancient death machines? Drop a comment below and tell me which Roman artillery weapon you'd want on your side in a siege: the precise scorpio, the versatile ballista, the devastating onager, or the mobile ballista. And if you're ready to uncover more of history's most brutal secrets that mainstream historians won't tell you, hit that subscribe button.